Welcome in, everybody, to the Flagship podcast. I am Chip Brown of Horns 24/7, joined as always by our fearless leader, the managing editor of Horns 24/7, Taylor Estes. Taylor, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Chip. How about you?
Hey, I'm fired up. We are 1 month from today. Spring football will start.
Yes, sir.
How about
Football
that?
back in. I mean, let's be honest. Football's always in the air on the Flagship podcast, but actual practice is coming to all of our way here.
That's right. Football season never ends here on the Flagship podcast, but sometimes we do have actual football to talk about.
Yeah.
We will have 15 spring football practices to talk about, overanalyze. That will sustain us until we can get to fall camp. But March 22nd, spring football starts, and April 23rd is the spring game. So make your plans now.
Yeah. You know what, Chip? It's going to be interesting because ever since I've started covering Texas, I've never missed a spring game. Even when back in the day when UT Media Relations did not give us more than one press box credential, and I bought like basically second degree burns in the sun at one of the spring games. But I'm going to miss this year. It's going to be weird.
What?
Yeah, I have a wedding in Mexico, so I'm in the wedding party, and this date was set, well before the schedule. But it's funny because last year, Texas had a later spring football game, and this year, I was talking to our boss Kevin when I told him like, hey, if a spring game comes around this weekend, like just as a heads up, I won't be in the country. And I was like, but don't worry, like I would be shocked if they had their spring game later like they did last year. And literally the wedding is on April 23rd. So I basically talked that into motion back in July when I told him I wasn't going to be around. So, but hey, we have plenty of guys to cover. So you'll have to pick up the slack for me, I think, a little bit there.
Yeah, I was going to crack a joke about you have friends who are still getting married, but then I got married.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. These are the first go around. So
Yeah,
a little bit of an
right.
age gap here, but that's
Yeah.
what makes this show good, Chip, that we have
Hey,
various,
little sum
younger
for everybody.
Exactly.
Little sum for everybody. All right, we did get some interesting news this week with regard to the only punter on the team with any experience has now entered the transfer portal, and that is Ryan Buchevski, who did not play at all last year, coming off of a torn ACL, suffered 7 games into the 2020 season, and he was replaced by Cameron Dicker, and Cameron Dicker had an all Big 12, first team all Big 12 season as Texas's punter, averaging 46.7 yards per punt. But Cameron Dicker's gone. He's getting ready for the NFL draft. And now Ryan Buchevski, who played for 30 games, averaged 43.3 yards per punt in 2020 before that torn ACL, is moving on. So Taylor, Texas will have a first time, barring transfer, we'll have a first-time punter and kicker in 2022 after Cameron Dicker handled those things beautifully last year. So a 5-7 team that had special teams as a strength will not know what's going on with its kicking and punting on special teams going into 2022.
Yeah, that's not ideal situation. I mean, obviously Texas could add somebody from the transfer portal if that does come about, but I know that the former head coach Tom Herman used to not really give much credit to kickers and punters, but the reality is they're monstrous, especially if you have good ones, and especially if you have bad ones. I mean, if you have bad kicking and punting, that can really alter the success or failures of the team or impact it, I should say. And Texas has been a little bit fortunate in that area for a number of years, dating back to Michael Dixon and especially his Ray Guy Award winning season, the first Ray Guy Award that Texas football has ever claimed in the history of the program and in the history of the award. And he was so clutch. I mean, literally, I'll never forget after that Oklahoma State game in 2017 when Mike Gundy, that game went into overtime, and Mike Gundy said in postgame that their punter almost single-handedly beat us. And that's kind of started a trend of Texas having pretty decent punting. I mean, Ryan Buchevski obviously went through some ups and downs early on, but the fact that Cameron Dicker stepped up when Ryan Buchevski was getting much, much better first of all, starting in the 2019 season, I mean, he had back-to-back, seasons where he had injuries and then didn't play at all in 2021. So this is definitely something to watch and may go a little under the radar at this point, but there's no denying that this is a little bit of a hindrance, I would say, for Texas, just in general.
Yeah, you don't notice special teams unless they make a mistake.
Yeah, or unless
But
they are, Michael Dixon that was a MVP of a bowl game.
yeah,
That
unless you
never
have
happens, like, never.
right, unless you have phenomenal playmakers on special teams. But like kicking and punting for the most part, you don't stop and talk about them unless, it's something that's bad that's happening. So you're right. Texas has had it going. I mean, Michael Dixon started this relationship that Texas has had with Pro Kick Australia, where they've, pulled Dixon, Buchevski, and now Isaac Pearson. Isaac Pearson was, according to 24/7 Sports composite ranking, the number 3 punter in the 2021 class, and the number 1 punter coming out of Australia. So from what I've heard, Isaac Pearson was more consistent than Ryan Buchevski last year, which is obviously a good sign. Either Isaac Pearson was, that good, or Ryan Buchevski was struggling after his injuries. But, Isaac Pearson, come on down, baby. It's your turn. Let's see what you got. No pressure. Cameron Dicker averaged 46.7 yards per punt, which is just a shade below your buddy Michael Dixon's 47.4 yards per punt, Taylor. So look, if you can average 43 point anything yards per punt, that's not bad.
Yeah.
You want to be in the 44, 45 range. Anything above that, you're looking at an all-star year. So just something to put in your back pocket. Texas will have a new, remember they lost Justin Motter, the long snapper, and Hudson Card, I hear, is no longer going to be holding. So Texas will have a new snapper, new holder, new kicker, and a new punter. So Jeff Banks, the $1 million man, coaching special teams, he'll get it right.
Yeah.
That's the benefit of the doubt, I think, that he's earned as a special teams coach in college football.
For sure. I mean, that's the one positive that you can look at the situation. If any coach out there is going to figure out a way to make this work, it's him. So, he's elite in what he does. We've talked him up plenty of times, and will continue to. I mean, he has a reputation as one of the best special teams coaches, one of the best recruiters in college football, and that doesn't come lightly. That's why he makes $1 million as a special teams and tight ends coach. Because
he and Steve Sarkisian did the in-home visit with Isaiah Nayor.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And we'll touch on this real quickly because we're all about cross promoting here at the Flagship podcast. And earlier this week, we posted an interview with South Lake Carroll head coach Riley Dodge, who was Quinn Ewer's high school coach at South Lake Carroll. And it's getting a lot of attention. Imagine that, a podcast that discusses Texas's quarterback situation is getting a lot of attention. But it's an interview again, for those of you who are like, I don't listen to podcasts. Why not? In the old days, they used to listen to the radio.
Right.
Like, he used to listen to interviews on the radio. So don't say, "Oh, I can't listen to anything." It's nice, it's relaxing. Put it on your phone, drive around in your car, you're listening to it, and suddenly you're gonna be like, "I want more."
Right.
What so, anyway, check out our interview with Riley Dodge talking about Quinn Ewers, because there's stuff in there you probably haven't heard about Quinn Ewers. And we'll just touch on this, Taylor, because I thought this grabbed both of our attention when Riley Dodge talks about how Quinn Ewers, abruptly had double hernia surgery right in the middle of his junior football season, where he missed 8 games, but rehabbed from double hernia surgery up in Philadelphia with the guru of hernia surgeries, and and then did everything in his power to get back and made it back to play in the playoffs for South Lake Carroll when they upset number 5 Duncanville and reached the state championship game against Austin Westlake. That game proved to be his last start as a quarterback. Um, but Riley Dodge talks about the toughness, the willingness to do what it took to be back on the field for his team. You'll hear in there where Riley says we were probably a year away that year when he talks about 2020, because South Lake Carroll was like ranked 21st when they upset Duncanville at number 5 and then lost to number 1 Westlake. And obviously Riley Dodge would have loved to have had Quinn Ewers in 2021 when Ewers would have been a senior at South Lake Carroll. Of course, he, ended up reclassifying, graduating early, going to Ohio State. But Taylor, I thought, when Riley Dodge says for Texas fans, they want to know they're getting a tough quarterback, he said Quinn Ewers is as tough as they come.
Yeah, and he went, talked at length about Quinn Ewers and how impressed he was with him, being able to rehab. He said, and I quote, that Quinn, quote, rehabbed the crap out of his hips and found a way to get back. And then he said, I think a lot of kids probably would not have come back. They probably would have hung it up and say, it is what it is. I'll try to find a way to get back next year. But that was not what Quinn Ewers did. He battled. He at one point Riley Dodge said that he wasn't even fully cleared to play, and Quinn Ewers was not going to not play in games, especially with his team in contention for a state title run, and that speaks volumes, Chip, in my opinion. I mean, it was interesting to hear him say about everything that Quinn Ewers went through, the struggles. But the fact that he is that type of teammate, I think a lot of people don't necessarily know that about Quinn Ewers yet. I think we've talked a number of times on the Flagship podcast about how there's this persona almost around Quinn Ewers of him, because he was such a generational type of recruit and situation coming out of South Lake Carroll, reclassifying early, going to Ohio State, making a lot of money in NIL. I feel like there's almost, there's a little bit of a negative persona at some point, like, oh, this kid, all he cares about is the money. But if you listen to what Riley Dodge had to say about Quinn Ewers, that is absolutely not the case. And if we're going to listen to anybody, especially at this point, maybe we should listen to the last coach who truly did coach him. I mean, obviously Quinn Ewers was coached at Ohio State, but came in late, didn't have the full, didn't go through spring, didn't go through a normal summer, enrolled in August in Ohio State. So sure, they may have quote unquote coached him, but this is the guy that knows him, knows his family, knows everything about Quinn Ewers. And I was really impressed. It's usually a good interview when we turn off the record and, our guest leaves, and then Chip and I pop on the screen and we just talk. And Chip's first thought is, man, that could have been fantastic for the Insider. And so, which is our weekly, Insider notes package over at Horns 24/7. And that's how good this interview was. I think it really shows what Quinn Ewers is both on and off the field, and will give Texas fans not just a, hyped version of him, but an actual factual version of who he is from somebody who knows him best as a player.
Yeah, and talks about how he pretty much just loves to fish and hunt and play football, and he's a cool customer, doesn't get too high, doesn't get too low. He's not the fire-breathing dragon. In fact, Riley Dodge talked about how there were times he wanted him to be, this fire-breathing dragon, but that's not who Quinn Ewers is. He's just chill,
Yeah.
and we've seen quarterbacks like that. I think Bryce Young at Alabama is like that, just completely unflappable, no matter what the circumstances are, because they have so much confidence in their ability. Aaron Rodgers is that way. Now,
Yeah.
we're not going to start throwing, first time starters in college, but, not make that comparison. But again, certain quarterbacks have that. Joe Burrow have that demeanor where nothing's going to phase them. So,
And that's what Riley he said. He's like, there's parts of Quinn that reminds him of Joe Burrow, just kind of that cool, the cool kid, like ice, and I thought it was funny. Riley said, there are times where he had to check himself because he's like, am I getting like too over the line here? Because Quinn was so, just even keeled and so just smooth when it came to, the adversity type of situations on the field that he as a coach had to wonder if maybe he was being too intense because his quarterback wasn't. And but ultimately, Chip, you want a guy that can be as good as they come both on the practice field and when the lights turn on and in crunch time. And I thought it was very important that he said, one of the prerequisites that you want in a quarterback is a guy that's tough. And that's what Quinn Ewers is. And toughness is not just a physical thing. I mean, toughness is a mental thing. And hearing just all about that, his demeanor, how much he rehabbed to get back to help his team. That's a tough guy, in my opinion, mentally and physically. And can you ask for more? Oh, and then he called him a generational arm strength talent too. So
right,
that's
right. Yeah.
there's a lot. There's a lot. Chip did a fantastic job interviewing Riley Dodge, and Riley nailed it. I mean, it's not hype. He has no reason to sit there and promote a kid if he didn't believe in him. He has no reason to sit there and bash a kid if he didn't believe in him. He just told it like it was. And if you haven't listened, absolutely go back and listen to Monday's episode of the Flagship podcast.
Yeah. Listen to Taylor. Go
Yeah,
back and listen.
listen. Come on. I always tell Chip and all of the guys that work at 24/7, like, just listen to me, guys. I'm always right.
Just
So
listen
come
to
on.
Taylor. All right.
I
Okay.
won't steer you
So,
wrong. I won't steer you wrong. I'll tell you that.
so that we just gave you a little bit, but go listen to the full interview and then tell all your friends and remember where you heard it first. All right. So, basketball, good news and bad news. Good news, the Texas women are rolling. And fans need to go out and support that women's team. It's embarrassing. But the exact opposite happened for the Texas men. Too many people showed up to support that game, but they were wearing red and black as Texas Tech spoiled Texas's attempt to split with the Red Raiders this season. And Texas Tech fans did a great job of buying up those tickets, and they were there. I said that the lower bowl was predominantly burnt orange, but the upper deck was more than 50% red and black, to the point, Taylor, where they showed a picture of Chris Beard on the Jumbotron with 7 minutes left in the game, and they had to pull it down because there were so many boos
Mhm.
in Texas's own arena. Now, the good news is, Texas fans, that's what it's going to take to become the kind of, basketball home court advantage that Chris Beard built at Texas Tech. It's insane what he built out there. And I get, well, we have more things to do in Austin. It doesn't matter. They don't
Do you
care.
want to become USC? That's all I'm going to say. Do you want to become USC?
Right.
No, you don't.
Right. So get on board. And it's kind of pitiful that, what happened, but good wake up call.
Mhm.
Because you can get mad at the ticket office or whoever you want to get mad at. How about looking at the fact that your coach built that at Texas Tech?
Yeah.
I covered Tech in the 90s. It was a ghost town. Basketball has not been important in Lubbock until Chris Beard made it important. And he made it important to the students. And he's doing a really good job of it here at Texas. That student section, which is going to be right around the court next year at the Moody Center, is growing. And they're going to be there for him because he has done everything at every turn to reach out to the students. to the point where I would probably say the same to Vic Schaefer. As good as Vic is, and his team's having, quote unquote, a better season than Chris Beard's right now, higher in the standings, whatever, better record. Vic's going to have to, reach out to the students too. And because Texas fans have to be courted, they have to be made to feel special. They have to, and look, you want to build that relationship with your coach, with your team. Mac Brown had to tell Texas fans, come early, be loud, stay late, wear orange. And they did.
Mhm.
They liked Mac Brown. And, I don't know what it is, but it matters. It does matter. Chris Beard went overtime to build that relationship with the students at Texas Tech. And now their home games are bananas. And their women even are averaging double what and well, not double, but more than what Texas is getting. And Texas Tech's women's basketball team is in the dumps. So it's fascinating. Now, to the game, Marcus Carr, Timmy Allen. I mean, Timmy Allen, leading scorer on the team. Marcus Carr, second leading scorer on the team. For 30 of the 40 minutes, they both had zeros for points. And Marcus Carr finished with 0 points, no free throw attempts. And yes, he and Timmy Allen were the focus of Texas Tech's defensive game plan. That can't happen. Like, if you think you're an NBA player, you've got to be able to get your own shot. You've got to be able to affect the game in other ways. You've got to get to the free throw line. And, that just, wow. I mean, 0 points. This is a guy who's averaging double digit, points, and, no free throw attempts. Again, Andrew Jones is the guy who can seemingly make everything happen when he wants to make it happen, whether he wants to get in the paint, whether he wants to shoot threes, get to the free throw line. He did it all again. And Marcus Carr had one of, and then Chris Beard says, today, we're recording on Tuesday, Chris Beard says, well, the good news is all of that stuff with Marcus Carr was mostly self-inflicted. So it's correctable and he can fix it. There are 4 games left in the regular season. That on your home floor, that cannot happen. That
No,
absolutely cannot happen.
no, not at all. Especially and I mean, like, as you mentioned, Timmy Allen too. I mean, he ended with 3 points total.
Yeah, he ended up
Oh,
with
I'm sorry, 6.
Yeah, he ended up with 6, and he did make some plays late. I mean, Texas was down 1 with a minute 36 left. They were absolutely back in this game, but they don't score for the final minute 36, get outscored 5-zip, and that's when Timmy Allen and Marcus Carr have to take over. They have to take over the game. They have to make sure that the ball is in their hands. They're the guys who've got the most experience. But unfortunately, Taylor, they came from not successful programs. They were great players on not successful programs, and they still have to get what it takes to finish out a game against top-end talent and top-end teams. So it just, you thought it would have happened before now. You thought, and look, Marcus Carr has shown up in big ways, in big games. He scored 15 straight points against K-State at home earlier this year. He can do it. It's the consistency. And that's, because Chris Beard said it again today. He said, I think we're one of the, he said, I think there are a handful of teams who can win 6 games to win the NCAA tournament. And I think we're one of them. And, he's trying to manifest this thing and talk it into existence, because at different times he's seen his guys flash and maybe look like, if they could pull it all together, they might be, a really tough out because they play such good defense and scrap and hustle. But man, your point guard is such a critical, it's your quarterback of the team, that player. We know TJ Ford, what he meant to this program. And if Marcus Carr is your point guard, that score line can never happen at this point in the season or ever again.
It should never happen to begin with, especially from a player who, yeah, he was a great player on a not so great team. That makes it even more glaring of an issue to me, Chip, because he had to be a great player on a not so great team and he stepped up. And then now he's not. And it's like that. I mean, I I would be shocked if he's not taking accountability for it at all. But
Yeah,
my
and he
biggest,
apologized after the
yeah,
game.
yeah, and rightfully so, and everybody can have a bad game, but a bad game, in my opinion, should be like 4 points scored, like something like that. But
Well, especially in against that team
yeah,
who
yeah,
embarrassed you in Lubbock on your home floor where their fans are back.
embarrassing you, yeah, they're
Right.
embarrassing you at home, and
Where's
that,
the
yeah.
I'm gonna take over this arena and shut these people down, you know?
Exactly. There was one point, I don't remember exactly when it was, because I was watching it from, like, at home, like, on TV where you were at the arena, so I'm not sure if you remember this, but there was one point, I think it may have been Andrew Jones, maybe? Somebody threw an air ball, and you could hear the air ball chants on the broadcast, and it was a Texas player that missed it and that airballed a shot, and that's how loud the Texas Tech fans are, and it's like, if you can't take pride in defending your home court, especially, like, that just can never happen again. You're right. Like, it's inexcusable in my opinion. And I think Marcus Carr is going to learn a tough, or have be served a tough dose of reality after that, because that should never happen ever again. It should never happen. It should never happen in the first place to begin with.
Well, and, they've had, you know, Carr's had good games. That was not one of them. Timmy Allen, same. And Dylan DeZoo, you know, we've got to figure out what's going on with Dylan DeZoo because Trey Mitchell, the talented junior, a big man who is away from the team for personal reasons, and I'm not sure he's coming back. Taylor. Now Dylan DeZoo and Christian Bishop are your two big men. Christian Bishop's been playing great, but Dylan DeZoo's got to get to his level. I mean, Dylan DeZoo has got to be able to come in and make sure there's no drop off when Christian Bishop comes out of the game. And, I looked at it the last 6 games, he's averaging 1.5 points, 1.5 rebounds per game, and 8 minutes of game action. I mean, and he's shooting 23.1%. This is a 6'9", power forward who should be getting most of his field goals on dunks and putbacks, and he's shooting 23%, 3 of 13 the last 6 games. This has got to change, or Texas is not going to be doing anything in March.
Yeah, they may not, that streak of not winning an
Don't
NCAA
say it.
tournament Okay. I don't want to jinx.
What?
End it, Texas basketball.
Right,
Just finish it with
right.
that.
Just make sure you end it. Just make sure you win a game in the NCAA tournament. By the way, there are 2 games left, 2 home games left in the Irwin Center. Think about that. And then they're going to blow that place up. And the
Crazy.
Moody Center, the $388 million Moody Center, will open for concerts like in April, but for basketball next season. And, it'll be a 10,000 seat arena, 2,000 seats for students right around the court. It'll be a whole new atmosphere and a premium seat, if you will. Is that what it's going to take for Texas fans to, just unconditionally support these 2 basketball programs who are now in really good hands with the coaches who've been hired. But 2 more games. You've got TCU at home and then Baylor on Monday for Big Monday. So they've announced Baylor as a sellout. So, and by the way, Baylor fans were buying up tickets in the upper deck. And I
Texas
think
Tech fans just, like, taught everybody, like, "Hey, this is how you take over the Irwin Center."
and it's a wake-up call.
It should
I
be.
get it. I get it. I wasn't excited about Shaka Smart basketball, and Texas fans are off their game. They've let their guard down, and now it's a wake-up call that, oh, I'm a part of this. I'm a part of the team's success, like how loud I am and what kind of atmosphere I'm providing. Oh, anyway,
Come early, be loud, stay late, wear orange, right?
there you go. Pretty simple. All right. Women's hoops we mentioned.
Baseball, we gotta mention Texas
Baseball. We got to
baseball.
get to baseball
Yeah. I mean,
because
yeah.
I don't know if you can have a better opening weekend than Texas had against Rice. Now, this is not Wayne Graham's Rice. This is Rice coming off 3 horrible seasons under Matt Braga. They went 23, 29, and 1 last year. And now Jose Cruz is here to try to put it back together. Jose Cruz, who played for Wayne Graham in his first season as the head coach in 1992, and then played forever in the big leagues. And, it was like the number 3 overall pick in the 95 MLB draft. Now he's back to try and help save his alma mater. Texas, clearly the better team, but Taylor, my gosh, the first 2 starting pitchers, Pete Hansen, Tristan Stevens, go 6 scoreless innings.
0
And then,
ERA, both of them right now.
yeah, they leave the game with football type scores so they can start getting in other players, other pitchers like Andre Duplantier, who came in for 1 inning and like mowed everybody down. Well, everybody struck out 2 and got a ground ball. But I mean, this team, I'll wait until we, see them against tougher competition. But this is a confident baseball team.
Yeah, it is. And, obviously this year's Rice team and recent history of Rice has not been up to the standard, I would say, of Rice baseball, but it's still a program, in my opinion, Chip. It's kind of like the Cal State Fullertons out there. They're kind of a school that's not known for very many of their sports, but what you do know them for is baseball. And Rice has been that consistently. So I still, even though it may be a little bit on the downward trend in the last recent history, I still think that this is a solid opening, series or opening weekend series win, because I mean, it's not just that they, won like 1-0 or 3-4 or anything. I mean, Texas outscored Rice 36-3 in 3 games. And the fact that 36-3, and the fact that their Friday starter and their Saturday starter both pitched 6 innings, did not give up an earned run. Their Sunday starter gave up 1 earned run. So Tanner Witt has 1.8 ERA right now. I mean, you can't ask for much better baseball. And obviously it's easy to say that after that dominant of a performance, but if this is the sign, this is the reason why Texas is the preseason consensus number 1 overall team. Cause I mean, this is a talented roster that David Pierce has built up. And quite frankly, I mean, you have to think back. There have been a number of recruits that David Pierce had committed to Texas baseball that ended up never coming because out of high school, they were, top end draft picks. And so the fact that he's been able to kind of ride that wave too, because it's always a challenge when you're a baseball coach. If you're dealing with kids out of high school that end up being, top 10 round picks or something like that, a lot of times they'll go. My dad would tell any, baseball player out of high school, if you're not top 5 rounds, go to college, because if you're good enough to be drafted out of high school top 5 rounds, or it's say like 10 or something, you could turn that 10 round into a 1 or 2 round after like 3 years of playing baseball at the college level. So, but the fact that Texas has been able to kind of ride that wave, have the pitching rotation, the staff come back this year. I mean, this is an exciting time for Texas baseball. And this may be for the first time, you and I both have season credentials covering baseball. Not that we've never done that before. Usually it's just been one beat writer for us has been able to do the job. And now it's like, no, I think we need to promote this Texas baseball team because I think they may be the real deal this year if they continue this, especially.
Yeah, no, it's Jeff Howe and I are usually season credentials. Taylor's in.
I've never
And
been a season credential baseball holder. I'll say that.
well, I thought David Pierce, who compared Pete Hansen to a young Andy Pettit, let that sink in for a second. I said, who's going to surprise this season? Give me a player. You said last year Ivan Melendez would be one of the best hitters in the country. He was. I said, give us your bold prediction. And he said, Silas Ardoin's going to hit a lot better than he did last year. Silas Ardoin, the catcher, batted .239 last year, got off to a really slow start. His first at-bat of the season, home run. Double, single. I mean, in his first game of the year, he almost hit for the cycle. And ended up going 4 for 8, leads the team in hitting right now. So David Pierce, I got to give it to him. He has a pretty good handle on his team. And as impressive as all those 36 runs getting scored is, they also showed really good plate discipline. They drew 28 walks
Mhm.
during that series. Now, again, you can say, "Oh my God, Rice's pitching is terrible." You know, Texas is a confident team right now. We'll see how it translates, but Texas fans are usually grumbling about, "Oh, we can't hit, we can't hit." Hey, Troy Tulowitzki is working with these guys on the hitting, and they look like a confident team at the plate. So, good start for Texas baseball. All right, Taylor, you ready for some love it or leave it?
I am, Chip. Before we get to love it or leave it, we're going to take a really quick break, but stick around. We will have more football talk in Love It or Leave It next. So stay tuned. We will be right back. And if you're watching us on the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel, we will roll on here. Chip, you ready for some Love It or Leave It?
Let's do it.
Alrighty, I'm going to start off with some football for you. Love it or leave it on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of level of concern. The Longhorns kicking and punting going into next season is a 6.
Yeah, I'm gonna love this. Heck, it might even be 6.5, 7. Um, special teams is such a big part of the entire equation. There's a reason they say the 3 phases of football. And as we talked about earlier, Texas hasn't really had to worry about if they have a kicker who can hit a last second field goal to win a game, because Cameron Dicker had 3, game winning field goals, um, 2 of them on the last play of the game. And, last year, 15 of 18, he didn't have any last second situations, but they just didn't worry about it. And then the punting was sensational last year. And if those things start to break down, they demoralize a team. If if your punter shanks one and gives up, field position, it starts to erode at the confidence of the team. And so look, Texas, these coaches are smart. They recruit. Will Stone, Isaac Pearson. These are guys who Texas deemed good enough to come in and get it done. So we, you got to wait and see how they handle it. But yeah, it's a concern because again, this was a 5-7 team that performed really well in the kicking and punting portion of special teams. So um, yeah, it's a concern. It's an unknown. What do you think, Taylor?
I agree. I think I have to love it. And you're right because as we mentioned earlier in the show, usually when you're talking about special teams, it's special team errors or a situation like with Michael Dixon being named the Texas Bowl MVP against Missouri back in 2017. Those are the times that we're talking about special teams. But more times than not, it's not a positive side. It's usually the, oh man, if only they would have made that field goal. If only they didn't miss that extra kick. If only they didn't have that block kick. I mean, those are usually the type of things that where people are mentioning special teams and the kicking and punting game. And so, I think Texas, this is definitely a concern. I wouldn't say it's a level, one concern right now per se. I think that you can usually find specialists that are capable, and Texas has Isaac Pearson. Then they'll be bringing in Will Stone, as you mentioned, the 2 scholarship, punter kicker duo there. But yeah, I think that with the consistency that Texas has had at the on special teams in recent history, I think this makes it probably a little more of a concern among Texas fans, or it should be, just because they haven't had to worry too much about that in recent years.
Yeah. All right. Love it or leave it. Number 2.
My second, let's go to some basketball here. Love it or leave it. Texas fans will never support basketball the way the way that Texas Tech fans do.
I mean, right now, I want to love this because what we saw last Saturday was light years difference from where the Tech basketball fan base is, as compared to the Texas basketball fan base. But Chris Beard is on a mission, so I'm not going to love this.
Okay.
I'm going to leave it, and I'm going to see if Texas fans will come around, because they've come around at various times. They liked watching Tom Pender's teams go up and down the floor. Chris Beard's team plays, they play really tough defense, but you know, winning is nice.
Yeah.
And when the coach who's taken a team to the national championship game and is pleading with the fan base to get on board, and they have, I think they have a record, for season tickets this year, but it's more than that. It's going to take more than that. And so I'll leave this one open for the moment. But man, last Saturday, it sure felt like Texas basketball fans were never going to support their program the way, Texas Tech does. But Chris Beard is the reason that Texas Tech supports their basketball program the way it does. So Texas fans should just be jumping in line to support this guy, in my opinion. Taylor, what do you think?
I mean, honestly, and I know this is not going to go over well for Texas fans, but I'm going to have to love this, Chip, because even if Chris Beard were to, totally revamp, totally get the buy-in from Texas fans to not just buy season tickets, but actually go to the games for the season tickets that you purchase.
And
And
get there early instead
yes,
of, 6 minutes into the game.
yeah, exactly. So, I think that's great and all, but until I see it, I can't leave this. I have to love it. And I just don't see at this point in my experience in covering Texas, my experience being, a former student at the University of Texas, it's going to be very difficult for me to ever envision a situation where Texas fans are going to go to the lengths that Texas Tech fans went to try to buy out seats for an away game in an arena just to try to take over the home court advantage for basketball. I just don't see that coming because I just have never seen Texas basketball fans really do that. So because of that, I'm going to love this and say that, you know, they may never support basketball the way that Texas Tech fans do. Now, I do agree with you though. I think if there's a coach that's going to do everything that's his powers to prove me wrong, it's going to be Chris Beard, 100%. And I hope that they do cuz I mean, these college athletics is awesome. Like it's so in my opinion, I just love college sports so much better than professional sports. It's just there's so much more times than not, so much more um,
Passion.
engagement and passion, the fans, the rivalries, all of that is what I love about college athletics. And I think that Chris Beard is the type of coach that can bring that fire out in Texas fans, and that's a good thing to have. But until I see it, I have to say that there's no chance in my mind right now on February 22nd, 2022 that Texas basketball and their fans will ever support the program as much as Texas Tech fans do.
Yeah. All right. Love it or leave it. Number 3.
All right, we're going to move to some softball talk here, Chip. Love it or leave it. It's too early in the season to be concerned about Texas softball losing all 5 games at the St. Pete Clearwater Elite Invitational last weekend.
Uh no, I'm gonna leave this. I Here's why. And Mike White, who's as good as there is as a softball coach, um, and Texas started the season number 9. They lost a game in you know early in the season, and then they were 11th going into this, and they lose to Florida State and Auburn and UCLA, who was number 3, um, and then lose to Notre Dame and Central Florida. Central Florida was ranked like 24th, and Texas led in that game, big. And then the pitching is what bothers me right now about Texas softball. They bring in Haley Dolcini from Fresno State. They proclaim her their number 1 pitcher. She did not pitch like a number 1 pitcher in this St. Pete Elite Invitational. In fact, the best pitcher was freshman Sophia Simpson, which is great news. But Shea O'Leary, who's got experience, has been in some big games. She has a .00 ERA right now. Like I watch through my fingers when Shea O'Leary goes out to the mound, and I'm not trying to be a jerk. You
No,
just
yeah.
like she doesn't have it. She doesn't have it right now, so she's got to work through some things, get her confidence back. Um, and so yeah, there is a little concern because that was a perceived strength, and anytime a perceived strength turns into a weakness, and you lose 5 games in a row in one weekend, that's gonna kind of hit you confidence wise. So it's a concern. It's not the end of the world, and Mike White has plenty of time to get this thing right. And you go play great teams in this elite invitational to find out where your holes are. So, you know, but I am going to leave that because I am a little concerned about the pitching, Taylor. What
Okay.
about you?
You know, I agree with what you're saying. I just think it's too early right now. If this continues, obviously I'm going to change my tune. But I think it's hard that you go back to last season with Texas baseball, for instance, when they were swept in that Houston baseball classic, and then they turn it around and
The
make a run.
Globe Life Classic up in Arlington.
Yeah, and they played a number of ranked teams in that tournament that they
You
had,
got
and
shelled.
they got yeah, they did, and it was a wake-up call for, I think, Texas baseball, and so I think if you're a Texas fan, Texas softball fan right now, you hope that this is a wake-up call for the team that, "Oh my goodness, like, we had some, hype going into the season, and then we get embarrassed, in 5 straight games against ranked opponents, and some of those ranked opponents were ranked lower than Texas." You hope that at this point they take the loss as a fuel to fuel their fire for the rest of the season. So I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. I think that Mike White's a really good coach. I think that if there's a coach that's going to get the best out of these players, it's him. He was hired at Texas for a reason. And I think let's see him go to work with this team. It's definitely a concern, but I'm going to have to love it in saying it's too early in the season to be thinking that this is the way that the season's going to end. And I could be totally wrong. I mean, they may not be as good. They may have been overhyped all year. We don't know at this point. And I think that's where I can't say that I'm like just, oh, this is the end of the world for Texas softball. I think let's let this play out a little bit longer before I make that. So I'm going to have to love this one.
Sure makes you appreciate Kat Osterman.
Yeah, seriously.
I
I
mean,
mean, when you have how many Olympics did she play in, and how many gold medals did she
yeah,
win? I mean,
I mean, unbelievable.
yeah.
She like pitched every game too. It was like,
I mean,
and they were
did
all
she just
complete games.
retire?
Yeah,
She's
yeah,
older
because
than
she
me, and she just retired.
right.
So,
Well, she came out of retirement for the Olympics at 38,
yeah,
and now is back retired. But
yeah. I was gonna say, I think she's at least 5 years older than me or something like
man,
that. So, yeah.
if you have one or two elite pitchers in softball, you can dominate.
Oh, yeah.
You can dominate the country. I
Mhm.
mean, if you have one or two elite pitchers,
If you have
um,
2, you're probably
yeah,
dominating.
yeah,
Like, not like you can. You probably are. More than likely, you are if you have 2. If you have 1, you definitely probably can, for sure.
yeah, no
Texas
doubt.
learned that the positive way too when they had some
All
of those.
right. Well, again, 30 days from the start of spring football. Football season never ends here on the Flagship podcast. And don't forget to check out our Flagship podcast interview with Riley Dodge, the head coach at South Lake Carroll, who coached Quinn Ewers, for all the inside intel from Riley Dodge about what it was like having Quinn Ewers as the quarterback of that South Lake Carroll team. Make sure you check that out. And thanks so much for listening today. I mean, come on. We got a lot going on right now. We got the overlap, the massive overlap going on with basketball, baseball, soon spring football. So we'll be here for you. Don't you worry. So thanks again for listening. For Taylor Estes, I'm Chip Brown. We'll see you over at Horns 24/7 until the next Flagship podcast airs. Until then, stay safe and keep the faith.